Without any further delay, I'd like to introduce the panel of speakers, shuyukh, who have dedicated their weekend time to come and spend with you. So the credit goes both to the scholars as well as all of you who have taken out the time to come and join hands together to find a solution for this issue. The first speaker for the evening will be Sheikh Tim Humble. Sheikh Tim Humble accepted Islam at the age of 14 years. He studied at the Islamic University of Madinat al-Munawwara and is now engaged in da'wah with Kalima Islamic Center in Dubai. May I humbly invite to speak on the topic, when should I marry, to Sheikh Tim Humble, please.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. We begin as always by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by sending peace and blessings and salutations upon His messenger Muhammad, the one who was sent as a mercy to all mankind, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, and upon his family and his companions and all those who follow them until the last day. I'm very pleased to be able to address this topic for you here tonight, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this of benefit and to make it correct and true. And the topic that I've been given is an introductory topic that kind of, I guess, comes before the other topics in chronological order, because it is the topic of when should I marry. And because we have a very short time tonight, I'm going to try to squeeze this as much as possible. And so I'm going to start by saying something. Some of the scholars of fiqh in Islam, they said that marriage is a very unique thing. It is a very unique ruling in Islam, because it covers, or it is said to cover, every single ruling from wajib all the way through to haram. From fard all the way through to haram. And even though some of these cases have some issues with them, the general concept is that marriage can fall anywhere within the rulings of Islam. So let us begin by understanding the beginning of when a person should get married, i.e., when does it become permissible for a person to marry, before we talk about when it is recommended. Because the title, When Should I Marry, indicates when is it recommended for me to marry. Let's look at the beginning. When does it become mubah? When does it become permissible for a person to get married? And so marriage in Islam is something that happens between two adults. And Islam defines an adult by someone who has reached the age of puberty, the age of adulthood. And that is the point at which, Islamically, a person may be able to get married. We haven't got to should be able to get married, but may be able to get married. You have one more lower limit, and that is the lower limit that is imposed by the law and the legal framework of the country that you live in. And Islam requires us to respect this and to implement it. And so, for example, Islam may allow a person to marry at the age of turning to adulthood, and it may be that the country does not allow them to marry for 1 year after that. So essentially, the minimum age that you have in Islam, because Islam transcends all cultures and all nations and covers the entire globe, and everybody's situation is different. I'm not here to tell you an age you should marry at 18, or you should marry at 19, or you should marry at 17, but here to give you the guidance that Islam gives you as to when you should marry. And so Islam, across all times and all ages, says that the minimum age is the age of adulthood, and that marriage is something between two adults. In terms of a minimum level, then you have the legal minimum level that is stipulated by the law in the country in which you live, which varies around the world somewhere between 16 and 18 years old, depending on where it is that you live. So this sets for us a minimum standard, and this is something that I believe everybody here already knew before they came here tonight, that marriage is something between two adults, and that marriage is something that is governed by a minimum age according to the law of the country. So that's not so surprising. But do we have some guidance as to when a person should marry? Al-Imam Muslim, rahimahullah ta'ala, narrated along with other scholars of hadith, and he narrated in Kitab al-Nikah, the book of marriage, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala an, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to us, he said to the companions, Ya ma'ashara shabab, all group of young people, all group of young men, man istata'a minkum al-ba'ata falyatazawwaj, فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ وَأَحْصَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ. He said, whoever of you is able financially to do so, or young men, whoever of you is financially able to do so, let him marry. Whoever of you is financially able to do so, let him marry. For indeed this will be better for him to lower his gaze, and better for him to protect his private parts from the haram. So the Prophet ﷺ encouraged marriage for those people who are the shabab. Who are the shabab? The shabab are those people from adulthood all the way up to somewhere around the region of 35, 40 years old, something like this. All of them are called shabab. So these shabab, these young men, are encouraged, recommended from the earliest possible age that they have the ability to do so. They have al-ba'a. They have the stability to be able to do so, to get married. Now we're going to come back to this hadith insha'Allah ta'ala in a few moments. But let us also set some more guidelines so that we can narrow the range a little bit. When does it become fard for a person to get married? We've covered when it becomes permissible at the age of adulthood, or according to the law of the country, the minimum age that is stipulated. We're now going to ask, or we've talked a little bit about the recommendation of marrying for the young people, according to the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu in Sahih Muslim and others. And now we come to talk about what? When does it become fard? When does it become an absolute obligation? And the scholars of Islam, they say that it becomes an absolute obligation the closer the person fears that they will fall into the haram. So when a person feels that there is nothing between them and zina except for that they should get married, and this is an urgent and desperate case, then it becomes wajib, it becomes an obligation upon them to get married. As for when the matter is less than that, it is not a matter of such severity, then it falls under the recommendation of the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, O young men, whoever of you is able, let him get married. Some might say this hadith is directed to the young men. We say that those young men, they need young women to marry. And so the young women, for sure, they are also included within the hadith, because those young men, of course, when they look to get married, they will marry the young women of a similar kind of age to them. And so they are also included in the hadith by understanding. So what do we understand from this? As we said, we understand that as a person moves into adulthood, then it becomes permissible as soon as they reach the minimum legal age. Beyond that, it becomes recommended. And the closer they get towards feeling the need to marry, and the closer they get towards fearing the haram, the closer the ruling comes towards the obligatory. And if it is a matter that there is nothing between them and the haram except that they must get married, then it becomes an obligation for them to get married. But it's not befitting for us to allow the situation to reach such an extent. And that is why this recommendation is there. And that is why this recommendation is there. But we have one more thing to deal with in this hadith very briefly. And that is the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Man istata'a minkum al-ba'a," the one who has al-ba'a. And the stronger opinion regarding this word al-ba'a is that it refers to a certain degree of financial ability. And I think that this is best explained to you briefly by reminding you that Islam is a religion of al-wasatiyah. It is a religion of a middle path. It's not a religion of extremes. It's not a religion where you need to own a house to get married. Nor is it a religion where you need to have your full-time job with all of its benefits and you need to have a stable, contract that you have had for many years. It's not like this. Nor is it the case that a person simply walks into a marriage with their eyes closed, not realizing that they're going to take on the responsibility of looking after somebody else. So now we have to find a middle path. And defining that middle path is somewhat difficult. But certainly there has to be a degree of maturity and there has to be an awareness of what marriage entails and an awareness of that responsibility. And of course, the amount of money is not defined because every woman is different and every man is different. Some women may be content with a very small amount and have a lot of patience. Some will require a much larger amount. As I've said to the brothers before, if you wish to marry a princess, then you need to be a prince. Yeah? So the different amounts of money vary from person to person. But it's certainly not the case that you need to be a rich man in Islam to marry. But you need to have the maturity to understand that you're going to be responsible for someone, that you're going to commit to rights and laws and regulations with regard to them, and that you understand what it means to care for that person and what it means to look after that person, and you have the basic ability to do so. Not that you necessarily have large amounts of money, but you have the basic ability to be able to fulfill that responsibility that Allah Azza wa Jal has placed upon you, bearing in mind that Allah Azza wa Jal described it as mithaqan ghalidha, a heavy oath and a heavy responsibility. So you need to have that. Is there an age for that? Is it 17 or 18, 19 or 20, 21 or 22? There is no age. Every single person is different. Every single human being is different according to their maturity, according to their desire, according to their needs, and according to what Allah Azza wa Jal has provided for them. But I will give you a small guideline in the last 5 minutes, and I don't want to be the first one to overrun in the time, inshallah. In the last 5 minutes, I will give you a very small guideline. And that is, I believe, that parents need to be ahead of the game. They need to be ahead of events. They need to be proactive rather than reactive. And so as soon as your child is approaching adulthood, you need to be thinking about the topic of marriage. Do you need to be looking for them? No, not at all. But you need to be giving this some sort of consideration. And I'll give you an example which I've given before to some of the brothers. You imagine now that your child in 2 years' time is going to change school. Already you have in your head which school are they going to go to? What sort of fees are they going to be? How am I going to transport them? What sort of home tutoring will there be? You have this in your mind. And the closer you get to the time, the greater your plan becomes and the more established. And marriage is no different. So right from adulthood, your child will begin to have those kind of desires and those kinds of needs to get married. And so you need to have a plan to deal with that. And communication with your child so that you're aware of that child's needs and you're aware of where they sit on the scale between recommendation, permissibility, and even it being obligatory for them to do so. And you're aware of that and you're preempting it. You're proactive rather than being reactive. So rather than waiting until the horse has bolted and then shutting the stable door, when they have fallen into something and they come back to you and say, I'm in a relationship and this has happened as that has happened, before that you need to be proactive, thinking, talking to them, giving them the Islamic rulings. Islam is wonderful in this regard. because it explains these issues with so much haya, with so much modesty, and in such an appropriate way that you don't feel shy to discuss them with your child who has just reached adulthood or just before adulthood, that you talk to them about some of the Islamic rulings and some of the issues that Islam explains, and you give them some knowledge and you keep that door of communication open, and then you see how they progress and how their circumstances are, and you make a sensible decision. The next point that I will make on this, in this regard, is that it's always easier if you start at an earlier age and move slowly than wait until a later age and work quickly. First of all, haste is from the shaitan. Secondly, when you begin at a younger age and move very slowly, first of all, the child has something ahead of them in their life. They have some vision in their life of where they are going, and they're much more likely to refrain from the haram because they can see a simple path ahead of them of when they are going to get married and how. Also, when you move slowly, you have the time to look and the time to think, the time to find the right person, the time to reject the person who is not right. But the people who wait until later age, when they become older, what happens? They become older, then they become worried. My daughter is 30, she's 27, she's 28. Who will marry her now? Quickly, the first person who comes through the door, if he prays or he doesn't pray, let us marry her to him. Because it has become a matter of urgency. Whereas if you started looking from 18, from whatever age it is, slowly, you might not find someone for 1 year or 2 years. You might find someone and then take some time to find out about them. You might arrange the nikah and then have a little gap or something like this. But you have options. If it doesn't work out, you have options for that person. But so many parents close the door for their children about when they should marry by delaying it to this imaginary stage when you will be stable and you will have your job and your PhD and then the question will be, who will it be that would marry the person at that age? And although there are possibilities, it becomes a lot more difficult for them and a lot more likely that they are going to fall short or they're going to rush into marrying someone who is not suitable for them. So I hope that has given you a set of guidelines. And bear in mind that Islam doesn't give you an age, because marriage in Yemen is not the same as marriage in India, and marriage in India is not the same as marriage in the Emirates. Every culture, every people is different. But you have a set of guidelines that work from the creator of the heavens and the earth, and they work for every circumstance. One small point in the last 30 seconds, and that is there is one particular group of people that I have a particular concern about when it comes to marriage, and that is those who are new to Islam. And for those people, my advice to them is, if you are not at the stage of fearing the haram for yourself, then wait. Why do I advise them to wait? Because many of them rush. They don't have the knowledge of Islam that is enough for them to choose who is good and who is not good for them. And many times our revert brothers and sisters rush into a marriage, and this can be a cause of a breakup of marriage later on when they realize that they didn't have the right Islamic tools to judge who was good for them and indeed who wasn't good for them. So that is my time up, inshallah. At least I believe so. And I hope, inshallah, that this has been of some benefit to you, and I'm sure you will benefit a great deal from the talks that are to come. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu feekum wallahu a'lam. Wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.